Why are you doing this? You did this to yourself. And admitting that is the first step. You're a crackhead. Thing is, this planet and these people, they're your drug of choice. It wasn't that hard to make a universe. At first you just checked in every once in a while. See how the Neanderthals were doing. Move a couple of continents around. But then you got more into it. You started playing a couple of characters of your own. Slaves, kings, messiahs. Pretty soon you were playing 24/7.
How long have I been?
You've been gone for 4,000 years. Not that time means the same for us.
You came looking for me?
That's what a girl does.
Why now?
Because you forgot who you were.
They forgot this wasn't real.
We couldn't just storm in on a fiery chariot. It was your universe. We had to play by your rules. We had to show you how limited and corrupt your little world was. Don't get me wrong, it's a nice place. It's cozy. But do you remember where you came from?
It was warm and white.
You can't describe it with human words.
You can't think it with human thoughts. We need you to come back. With us. Come back with me.
Happy heresies, and welcome to the desert of the real. Welcome you modern day Tom Sawyers. Welcome you Johnny Cash Bodhisattvas, you grunge Nephilim, and you existentialist otherkin. Welcome in the name of Hypatia of Alexandria, and Simon Magus, and Bill Hicks, and the Drive Through Jesus, and all our patron and patron tequila saints.
This is blasphemy! This is madness!
Aeon Byte Gnostic Radio broadcasts at the virtual Alexandria through the God above God.cam. We're slouching towards Bethlehem on our quest of complete liberation from this universe, not abandoning it like other lily liver, fridge magnet faiths, but certainly not letting its soul gravitational dark forces rule us anymore. If you want simple answers and to be led like a horse to water, then that's what you're going to get in your life, but will not get here on this program.
Fate is a joke. And as I once read on a wall in a truck stop bathroom in Barstow, the joke is in your hands. Oh my God, I just got that.
We're not so much about facts, but about insights. For example, let me tell you it's academic whether or not the Gnostics were world haters. Their views actually varied on this. The primary truth is that they ultimately saw the world as a lesser or secondary reality. And our destiny was with a more authentic reality. The Matrix might be great for some folk, crappy for others, neutral for most, but it's still a manufactured existence none of us belong in or even originated in. And none of us will be ultimately free within it.
Let me tell you why you're here. You're here because you know something. What you know you can't explain, but you feel it. You felt it your entire life. That there's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there, like a splinter in your mind, driving you mad.
Like the Gospel of Philip says, fear not the flesh nor love it. If you fear it, it will gain mastery over you. If you love it, it will swallow and paralyze you.
You're not your job. You're not how much money you have in the bank. Not the car you drive. You're not the contents of your wallet. You're not your fucking khakis.
The great sin in Gnosticism, after ignorance, is attachment to the accepted and surrounding cosmos, or systems, or structures. Because these and that ultimately slays all willpower and all freedom. man must create his own system or be ruled by another man's, as William Blake said. Freedom, volcanic freedom, is all that matters. And if we're honest with ourselves, we'll realize our true home is beyond Gaia's photoshopped by angels domain. It's in the stars, beyond the stars, in states of being where we are all truly united in light and in consciousness.
There is no price for individuality.
Each one of us is a fallen angel like Lucifer, but unlike the light bringer, we are done creating our hells from the smoldering remains of our pride and fear. We're getting out by getting into ourselves and into the truth and into the image, as the Gospel of Philip also explains. And certainly with the winged dreams of love and compassion.
You mean the devil won't show up?
Better to reign in hell than serve in heaven, is that it?
Philip K. Dick summarizes all of my verbal diarrhea I just spewed much better when he said, each one of us has a divine counterpart, unfallen, who can reach a hand down to us to awaken us. This other personality is the authentic, waking self. The one we have now is asleep and minor. We are in fact asleep, and in the hands of a dangerous magician disguised as a good god, the deranged creator deity.
I am the architect. I created the Matrix. I've been waiting for you.
The bleakness, the evil and pain in this world, the fact that it is a deterministic prison controlled by a demented creator causes us willingly to split with the reality principle early in life, and so to speak willingly fall in delusion.
I am an immortal.
You're not a god. You can take my word for it. This is 12 years of Catholic school talking.
How do you know I'm not a god?
Oh, please.
How do you know?
Because it's not possible.
Well, maybe the real God uses tricks. Maybe he's not omnipotent. He's just been around so long, he knows everything.
We're writing our own gospel and living our own myth, as the ancient Gnostics were wont to do. It surely pissed off the church fathers like Irenaeus, the old battle axe, and it certainly angers many in orthodoxy today. But myth and magic are supposed to be malleable, suitable to the different spiritual tastes that comprise our incarnations. After all, today we have no problem with rebooting our new gospels and their gods like Spider-Man or Batman or gay teen vampires. So why not the ancient wisdom texts? The message of transcendence and freedom is there. It's always there. But it should be calibrated to our needs and the needs of the historical waypoints we find ourselves in at the moment. This artistic deconstruction is part of any gnosis.
One imagination at a time, free from the influence of another.
Now, I've gotten word that a child is using his imagination, and I've come to put a stop to it.
I am Abraxas, in his meat sack incarnation of Miguel Connor. I am your Pompatus of Gnosis and smell of Colitas rising up through the toxic air of a tortured civilization. Borrowing from Madame Blavatsky, I know you have a divine spark because I can hear it snoring. Let me help you awaken it from this nightmare that is history, as James Joyce once said. Time to let me help you embrace the religion of the mind, as Gnosticism has been called, where you realize that you aren't housed in the universe, but that the universe is housed within your thoughts, and there are infinite possibilities therein. Since 2006, I've been saving souls one pink beam at a time.
How you have fallen from heaven, Lucifer, son of the morning! How you are cut to the ground! The Bayhas scum and people will stare at you and say, is this the man who made the nations tremble?
And on this approximately June 15th, the year of our demiurge 2013, we are joined again by Jeremy Puma, a truth seeker warrior I consider a friend, a mentor, and an all-around man in the high castle of good knowledge. Certainly check out our archive of past shows for other blasphemous appearances by Jeremy, where he kills a variety of topics, including practical Gnostic prayers, Philip K. Dick, the Gospel of Thomas, and Gnosis without Gnosticism. For more information on Jeremy, please visit his new site, strangeanimal.net. Jeremy manifests at the Agora of the Virtual Alexandria to discuss his latest book, How to Think Like a Gnostic.
Gonads are useful for their purpose, but they are no substitute for brains.
Once again, Jeremy distills the Gnostic wisdom of the ages and creates an elixir of immortality for our modern sensibilities. Thinking like a Gnostic means thinking like a completely free person, as I've been discussing, even if the powers and principalities crush you like a nut in between the vaginal lips of Hera.
You are a sad, strange little man.
As always, I found insights galore and Ganesha in How to Think Like a Gnostic. But let me bring another friend, Andrew Philip Smith, and his review of the book. It goes. How to Think Like a Gnostic explores a genuinely Sethian Gnostic path with plenty of perspective insights and new perspectives. Puma understands the historical scholarship, but knows that ancient texts must be applied creatively if they are to aid the spiritual quest. The result is an exploration that manages to be both systematic and meandering, taking in all aspects of the basic Gnostic myth, yet managing to include Buddhism, chaos theory, and Philip K. Dick, and a good dose of personal opinion. Puma is stimulating, yet not prescriptive. Anyone interested in the Gnostics will find much here to learn from, to sympathize with, and to dispute. And I suspect the author wouldn't have it any other way.
Listen, it's a tough universe. There's all sorts of people and things trying to do you, kill you, rip you off, everything. If you're going to survive out there, you've really got to know where your towel is.
So prepare for another great interview with Jeremy and more of that old-time Gnosis to help you become completely liberated from the universe. Like the Gospel of Thomas says, whoever has come to know the world has discovered a carcass. And whoever has discovered a carcass, of that person the world is not worthy.
The life you know, all the stuff that you take for granted, it's not gonna last.
And let me finish with a quote from How to Think Like a Gnostic. Jeremy discusses the benefits of what he calls the Pleroma worldview. And you will soon hear more, where again we are freed from the universe and into higher, more authentic realities. And it doesn't matter which reality is better or not. What matters is the truth. Here is the quote. The earmark of the pleromic individual isn't happiness, but dignity and confidence. You may be depressed and miserable with your circumstances in the world of forms, but underneath you understand and know that the good exists, that the present is temporary and eternal, and, more importantly, what these things mean and how they affect your lifestyle. You carry yourself with a healthy posture, respectful of and interested in the experiences you have. The pleromic worldview can just as readily manifest as what appears to be foolishness or childishness, but this is rare and dignity is maintained.
You need to go, don't you?
No, I can stay.
How long, forever? Every day you'd be here, you'd know what you were missing. What happens if you go?
The worst case scenario? Disintegration of everything into a fiery void. Oblivio is severed. The end of everything.
That's all?
That probably wouldn't happen. I guess I'm more worried about the human factor. You guys kill each other a lot.
In fairness, that's usually in your name. Plus, we've gotten much more efficient at it.
I like this world. I like my life here with you and Noelle.
But it's not real. I'm not really your wife. I'm not really my husband. On some level, it's all pretend. How many versions were there?
90. This is the last one.
Wow.
I've destroyed billions of people with a thought. And you'd like to think that it's painless?
Stop. You don't have to explain or apologize. Everything that is because of you. And if that's all there is, that's enough.
So,
you don't really need to pack anything.
I'm good.
You're great. It has been a pleasure.
Likewise. I love you.
I love you too. You bug.
This is the Aeon Byte interview. And with us, we definitely have the pleasure of being joined once again by my friend Jeremy Puma to discuss his new book, How to Think Like a Gnostic. How are you doing today, Jeremy?
I'm doing good, thanks. It's always good to be here. Have I beaten Andrew Philip Smith's record yet?
I think we discuss it every time. I'll have to check the numbers. He's been hiding for the last 6 months, so I don't know.
That's true, yes. Although he was kind enough to provide a blurb for the book, so I really appreciated that.
Great blurb, and maybe I'll get him on we can discuss Alan more. I know he'll
Yes.
come out of the woodwork for that. So,
That would be cool.
But anyway, before we get into your new book, Jeremy, How to Think Like a Gnostic, tell us about your other new venture, Strange Animals Publications.
Sure. So I tired of the day job just like everybody else, and quite into the fun and frustrations of publishing. Just, because I've done the print-on-demand publishing model for most of my books, for all of my books up until this point. And I thought, well, why not try and see if I can supplement the old income and produce some interesting work in the fields of alternative spirituality, science fiction, and cooking. And so I went ahead and registered a business. It's Strange Animal Publications, and the website is strangeanimal.net, and right now it's going to be focusing on my own stuff as I sort of get the ball rolling and learn the ins and outs of running the business. But hopefully starting sometime next year, I'll be looking for submissions from interesting and unique voices in those subjects.
Getting to the book, Jeremy, how did your new work come about, and how does it differ or complement your other books, such as This Way?
Well, I've never stopped writing about Gnosis, and I usually do it in the form of a blog. And the blog posts that I've done in the past typically have been sort of first drafts for material that would eventually become the various books that I've put out, including This Way, and now How to Think Like a Gnostic. And so they the essays in How to Think Like a Gnostic, there's some new material, but it is, they're based on some material that has been, collected on my blog over the past year or thereabouts. And I would definitely say it's a continuation of the themes from This Way. And my overarching theme that I think sort of bridges the two works is that we have this Gnostic body of work, the ancient Gnostic texts that speak to us so profoundly, and yet it's really sort of difficult to apply what is in those texts to our modern lives based on the historical understanding that we have of them. And so how can we take these texts, staying true to the history, but at the same time coming up with a way to be Gnostic, to think like a Gnostic in a modern context? How can we relate these ideas to modern life outside of the milieu of the typical, neo-Gnostic, churchy, that kind of 19th century occultism sense? And that's sort of what I am attempting to do in my body of work.
And on a little side note, do you find, I mean, you and I obviously enjoy the Secret Sun and the whole Gnosis thing. Do you think this works well in understanding or distilling the ancient Gnostics to this sort of sci-fi UFO conspiracy theory way?
The jury is out on that. I tend to focus a little less on that and that aspect of things. I talk about the difference between, the hypostatic or functional reality of the Gnostic myth, like are there literal archons out there and do they manifest as UFOs or whatever, versus the psychological, more internal way of thinking about these figures and how they help us interact with other people or how they help us be a little more satisfied with our current state of being or provide us with more happiness. To me, that's a more important question than the Gnosis, UFOs, ancient alien stuff. I think that stuff is interesting, but I see it a little more as kind of a cool, I don't want to say fan fiction, but like a speculative approach than what I'm doing, which is more of a practical approach.
Basically, what we're doing there is what we used to do when we were teens and we were comic book geeks. We're just hanging out and speculating all this great stuff. And it matters. It's
fantastic.
relevant.
Yeah, I think so. And, Chris Knowles, who does The Secret Sun, who you've had on your show, he's a really bright guy, and I love reading his work. And, I don't always agree with the whole Gnostics as UFO things, and we'll remark on that snidely sometimes. But it's fun. I think it's a good time to, and it really makes you think. I think the way that it stimulates your thought processes and your ability to make connections makes it sort of worthwhile.
After all, the concept of Gnosis is to expand your mind no matter what you're doing. So whatever position you take or how far you go, as long as your consciousness is expanded and you can take more in and see more out, that's what matters.
Right. Until you start deciding that you're the Messiah. In which case, all bets are off.
I thought we were all Jesus, or at least descended from Jesus. Oh, well. And, Jeremy, part of your book is a truly in-depth recreation of Gnostic cosmology, but certainly approachable to modern sensibilities. Could you describe some of its keynotes to the listener?
Well, what I wanted to do, so the book, it starts off with sort of a meta-myth. Sort of the monomyth of the Barbelo or Sethian Gnostic texts. And I wanted to really drill down to the framework, to what characters appear in the average, because you have a sampling of these Gnostic cosmologies, the hypostasis of the archons, on the origin of the world, and of course the secret book of John. And they all have all these different characters. But what can we find in them that's similar? What is the framework that underlies those? So what I did is I kind of took a look at what characters return in those myths a number of times. And of course you have, the god, the good god, and you have Barbelo, the mother or the womb. You have, the Aeons. You have the Christos, the mind character, the Nous. Sophia, the Demiurge, and the Archons. Those are kind of the core cast of players. And then, depending on the myth, the text that you're looking at, there's a lot of other players too. But I think if we're going to get a context, it's going to help us to have a foundational myth to build on. And that's what I kind of tried to do, is extrapolate the foundational myth and present that in relatively easy to understand terms. Because it's jargony. Gnosticism, the Gnostic myth, the Gnosis stuff is so jargony. And the jargon's good. It's there for a reason. But unless you have sort of a foundation, then, it's not going to really, you're not ever going to be able to penetrate that wall of jargon, I think. So that's what I tried to do.
Please tell us about your fascinating chapter on chaos theory and Gnostic myth.
So this is actually something that I noticed. I did this originally as a paperback in college when I was doing an independent study in chaos theory. And essentially, the idea is that you can express the Gnostic myth using fractal mathematics. Now, the way that fractals are created, and of course this is a very major oversimplification of an extremely complex mathematical theory. But basically, what you'll have is you have in math what we call an iteration of some kind. And what that means basically is you take a formula, let's just say x plus 2 equals y. And then you plug a variable into x. So in our case, let's say 1 plus 2 equals y, which is now 3. And then you would take 3 and use that as your new x value. So 3 plus 2 equals 5. And then you come up with a series that way. You plug it in again. The Fibonacci series is an example of this sort of iterative process, if that makes sense. So what happens is, and what people have discovered, is that if you throw some sort of random number into your iterated series, and it could be a microscopically small number, it could be 0.00001, then eventually that iteration, that series, is going to be totally crazy and chaotic. And that's sort of the basics of how you come up with the fractal diagrams, like those Mandelbrot sets. Those are iterated series that have just kind of gone off the map and become sort of chaotic. So my understanding is we have in the Sophia story the creation of a fractal pattern. We have the emanations coming out of the pleroma, the fullness, and they always return to the pleroma before continuing to create. So God emanates Barbelo, who returns to God, and through that iteration, they then produce the next Aeon down, and it just continues and continues and continues. Then you come to Sophia, and she desires to create without returning. And in doing so, she creates the demiurge, and that's the random act that threw off the whole iterative series and resulted in the mess of a cosmos that we live in today. Did that kind of cover the bases?
Yes, even though you're using math, of course, you're going to lose me, but I'm sure when I read it, it makes a lot of sense for those who are inclined for such sensibilities.
Right.
And, of course, what happens when people ask you, well, why did Sophia disobey? Why is there a demiurge? What is your answer to such questions?
My answer is, great question. See you later. No, I tend to be of the school of thought that says that in order for, because I tend to see everything as God coming to know itself, as the good God, up above, coming to know itself, and it can only do that by observing all aspects of itself, and all aspects under that word "all" has to include the possibility for something getting screwed up. And that's why it happened that way. Why is that? I mean, eventually, when you come to this discussion, you eventually come up with, turtles all the way down. And you just kind of have to stop someplace, I think, and say, Sophia was acting on good faith that she could do what she did, but she didn't return to the source, and that's what resulted in the demiurge. And that happened because it was inevitable. Something like that had to happen in order for the fullness to be complete. You can't know yourself without facing your shadow, and in a major sense, Sophia's creation was the shadow of God.
I think what we see and what people want, plain answers, exact answers. That's what they're going to get, and that's a problem with society. But instead of the Gnostic myths, leave a lot of room for speculation. Like one of your insights, which I found great, is you talk about the good God being all good, or the alien God being all good. But there's nothing that says that the good God is all powerful. After all, power has nothing to do with information.
Right. Not all powerful within the corrupted world in which we live. Because you can't have an all-powerful being without agreeing to give them that power. And so in most of our lives, I don't think the good God, the alien God, is all-powerful, because we don't often provide that God with the help that it needs to be more powerful.
And going a little bit lower to the old Yaldi Baldi, the Demiurge, I found truly compelling the part where you say that the Demiurge is really nothing and nothing more and nothing less than an image. But
right.
What is the Demiurge an image of exactly?
So I think there's people will see the Demiurge. Some people see the Demiurge as this, as the god of the Old Testament, the actual evil. Blah, 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 blah. Which, I don't really sort of share that point of view. I think there's a danger of really falling into sort of an anti-Semitic abyss if you go too far in that direction. And you need to do a lot of like sort of mental stretching to sort of justify that. No, of course, some of the earliest Gnostics did find that that's the case. But again, what I'm talking about is always sort of the modern context, the modern way to look at these things. Some other people think that the Demiurge is the ego, or the internal the individual's demon gone bad. But I actually think that the Demiurge is a relationship. I think it is an image that we construct of a relationship between ourselves and God when we try to understand and know God using the imperfect knowledge that we have access to here in the world, in the corrupted world. So that the way to determine whether the Demiurge is acting within the world is by looking at the way that you interact with the world. And, well, I'm going to leave it at that for now. I think that makes a little more... it's a good place to sort of let it trail off.
No, it makes perfect sense. And even the classic Gnostics like the Valentinians in the Gospel of Philip would agree, because after all, everything is an image, a shifting image. So really everything is an image pointing at something else or pointing within us.
Or, another way to look at it is a good tool we can use to sort of investigate this view is the unfortunateness of natural disasters, like the ones that are sort of increasing lately. And the demiurgic way to look at it would be, why did God do this to me? If you have your home destroyed by a tornado or an earthquake, why did God do this to me? Well, that's the demiurgic way to look at it, because that is a terrible thing for God to do. Like, why would God destroy your tornado? Destroy your house with a tornado. Whereas the other way to look at it is that God didn't do that. Your understanding of that as something that God did is the demiurge coming forth in you. What God did was save you from dying. It came to protect you through coincidence, sent the local Red Cross to help feed you and shelter you, and that so God, the alien God, the good God, the true God, doesn't manifest in these awful things. That's the demiurge. The true alien God, the God that you bless and you thank and you say, oh, thank you for keeping me safe. That's the one that is in the compassion that we show for other people, is in the miraculous salvation that we might have. I don't know. You can sort of riff on this, but you sort of see where I'm going.
That makes a lot of sense, or at least, again, it gives us more elbow room for insights. In another section of your book, Jeremy, you say that everyone we meet is a doppelganger. What do you mean by that?
Well, so you don't really ever meet anyone. You can't ever know a person without experiencing them. The only thing you can know about a person is the image that you have of them. And that image is something that we create. So you can't really determine what the true essence of someone is. You can only react to people based on your understanding of them. It's even more of an issue now in the online world, where I thankfully I know that you're a real person and mostly who you say you are, Miguel. Although there are some other people online who, you never know. Am I talking to a 13-year-old middle schooler? Am I talking to
the government?
The government? Am I talking to, the NSA or whatever? You don't know. And so that sort of basic phenomenological way of interacting with other people is something that we can't escape. So it's best to approach everyone and give them the benefit of the doubt, at least at first, because you don't know what their real core is, their inner being. You don't know what that is. All you know is what their image is, what their doppelganger is, that they're currently presenting for whatever reason. It's not as though it's always a sinister reason. It's just that we're so limited by the knowledge that we have, that we can't help but interact with other people only on, only based on what they present.
And of course, it might help to see, as the Sufis and the Hindus do, to immediately assume they have a divine spark and start from there, right?
Oh, I think so, very much so. I think it's always a good idea to, within the context of this way, the whole, the system that I've been writing about, it's better for the soul to just go ahead and approach people as though they have already achieved gnosis of some kind, because you don't know. I mean, you really can't. I mean, part and parcel of the whole theory behind what I'm developing here in this framework is that somebody can be a total jerk, or come off like a real problem, a real bastard, but still have gnosis. Whereas, as we all know, a lot of people who come off as divine spiritual leaders who work in soup kitchens may not have gnosis at all. There's no real way for you to know that kind of detail about a person without being that person.
And certainly something that should be brought up, and you and I have discussed it many times through blogs and other online interactions with all the other doppelgangers. But why do you think, and this for the listener who might not know, why do you think that cultism tends to drag people into some dark areas like anti-Semitism and spiritual elitism and all that?
Well, because I think that a lot of it comes from this sort of, there's this big... in some ways, it almost boils down to the secret, which is this idea that you create reality and that you have control over all of these things that no human can actually possibly have control over. I mean, it's one thing to say, I'm using magic as spiritual development. I'm using occultism to gain some insight into my interactions with other people. It's another thing entirely to say, I am going to not give any help to the poor because they created this own reality for themselves, and therefore they deserve whatever they're getting. And I think that there's a certain licentiousness that comes from a worldview that says that you are God, that you identify with God. This is why I'm really opposed to the idea that gnosis, that is the knowledge that you are one with God. I don't think that that's the case, and I think that's a dangerous path to tread, because I think that unless you are very psychologically healthy, which so few of us are, that can open some very dark doors and lead you down some paths where the archons like to play.
And we see it all the time. Something we haven't discussed before is your insights on reincarnation, which include in your compelling chapter on anthropology and the chain of attainment. Tell us a bit about this, Jeremy.
Well, so I actually do, as a good quasi-Platonist, I do think that the idea of metempsychosis and a part of us returning to the world in which we live makes sense, and I think that you can find some support for this in some of the literature that we talk about. So some of the Gnostic schools and some of the quasi, like I no longer consider Valentinianism straight Gnosticism. I think that was, I think Valentinianism was something just slightly to the left, sort of in the same family, but different than the actual Gnostic path. But I think there's enough in Valentinianism to draw on to assist us in our modern context. And the idea of the tripartite soul, or the tripartite human, I should say, the Hylic, the purely physical, the part of us that spits and scratches ourselves. Then you have, the psychic, which is the sort of middle of the road, partially spiritual, partially bodily, and then you have the pneumatic or all spiritual. And some of the Valentinian texts divided all of humanity into those three categories. You were either a Hylic, a psychic, or a pneumatic. And I don't think that that's necessarily a healthy way of looking at it, but I do think that that's sort of a useful division. I don't think that you have a person who is Hylic, a person who is psychic, a person who is pneumatic. I think that all of us contain all three of those aspects, and they sort of fluctuate in us. And I tend to think that the more Hylic one is, the more weighed down by the world you are, and the greater your chances are of being incarnated once again within this cycle of incarnation that we're in. So it proceeds once again through the levels of the psychic and the pneumatic, and that eventually, once you have incarnated enough and sort of overcome this Hylic baggage that weighs you down, that's when you escape from the chain of attainment, and you're no longer incarnated into physical form. That's the way I read it, and I want to add the caveat that I don't think that you can tell, just like what we were talking about with treating everyone as though they have Gnosis, I don't think you can tell from looking at someone's doppelganger how Hylic they are, or how they, I don't think this is a way to categorize people. I think this is a way to investigate yourself, to better know yourself and know what you're doing and where you want to be. You might want to be Hylic. Who knows?
On a Saturday night, chasing girls, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Who knows? But you can never say, I couldn't say, Miguel, you sure were Hylic today, because I don't know. I don't know what's going on inside you. And I think it's dangerous to classify. I think that's as bad as lumping everybody into the Hylic category, who's not you don't have Gnosis, you're an Orthodox person, well, therefore you're Hylic and you're doomed. And I think that's unhelpful and not very Gnostic.
But you seem to take also a more Lurianic Kabbalah approach, where we are manifesting or reincarnating in all places and time. Time and space don't have to stop us. We can appear in the future, another universe, and all that, right?
Right. Well, because I think that I think that when you really drill down to my understanding of God coming to know itself, in a large way, what each consciousness is a singular subjective experience of an objective consciousness. So there's only one consciousness manifesting at a time, and it's the consciousness that you are currently in. So right now, your consciousness is, we're getting really weird, metaphysical and crazy here, but your consciousness is experiencing me, and that is, God's experience of me, and my consciousness is experiencing you, so vice versa. And then if one of us was to die, I could die this afternoon and be hit by a meteor and be reincarnated as you, and vice versa. Or somewhere in the future, or in the past, because time is not linear or cyclical. It's an amorphous blob. It's all happening simultaneously. And in that sense, it's actually already happened, and it's never happened before. And so the sum total of all these conscious experiences is God coming to know itself, which is, in a way, also, it's very, it requires universalism, because, God would want to know everything about all of its parts and redeem all of its parts. And therefore, I do think that eventually every spark, every soul, every person, every aspect of this consciousness will be redeemed.
And what do you say to people or ideas that have happened in the past with the Hindus and karma, and even the Romans use it with the Neoplatonic chain of being, where this is your lot, this person is stuck in their own, this poor person has to work out their karma, so it doesn't matter, this person is here, we just got to accept fate as it is.
Well, that is, that's sort of the astral determinism, and I talked about that in my first book in this way. A Gnostic way of looking at that through myth is that fate is controlled by the archons. Hymarmony, or fate, is something that is controlled by the archons, which is why in the literature, the archons are always associated with the days of the week and the zodiac, and time passing. If your every move is controlled by the stars, then of course you're subject to fate and subject to the archons. But attaining Gnosis frees you from this idea of fate. It is in many ways influenced by Stoicism, and yet sort of speaks against the idea that you need to always accept the fate that you've been allotted. Because once you have Gnosis of the fact that you can escape fate, you basically have.
This is something we have discussed before, but it's been a while, and I think we should discuss it again for the listeners. But let's talk about what Gnosis is and what Gnosis isn't with your last two books.
Well, my definition of Gnosis, and of course there is about 1,000 definitions of Gnosis out there, but the one that I've found works best to me and makes the most sense is that it's not just knowledge, it's not just wisdom, it's not just some sort of awakening event, it's a combination of all of those things. And my opinion on Gnosis is evolving and coming more towards the idea that there's a lot of talk in Gnostic modern circles about the difference between Gnosis and episteme. Episteme being the Greek word for, book knowledge, whereas Gnosis is like personal knowledge of God. And I'm starting to think that it's a little more nuanced than that. The more I read into this thing, the more I study this, I'm starting to think that Gnosis is a kind of knowledge, but it's I have my friend Spark, who everybody wave to him,
Hey.
might say that episteme would be like being an undergrad, would be like learning how learning the quadratic equation, to bring math back into it, because that's a good analogy, learning the quadratic equation and when to use it. So and I couldn't tell you, I know nothing about the quadratic equation, other than where to look it up online if I ever need it. And episteme would be, I've learned the quadratic equation and now I know how to use it. Gnosis would be, now I understand and know why the quadratic equation works. I know the theories behind it. I know, et cetera, et cetera. So episteme might be, the knowledge that you get from reading a book, but that doesn't make it bad. Gnosis would be how to use a library to research more about that knowledge. And I do think that can and does involve an awakening event. I don't think, and as I talked about in the first book, the idea that Gnosis is equal to Zen enlightenment, I don't think that's the case at all. It's not that kind of awakening. It's more of an awakening to the proper way to become more aware of things. And that awareness by necessity includes knowledge and the wisdom of how to apply it.
Yeah, like you say, it's using the Christ, the knowledge, and the Sophia, the wisdom. And don't you always say Gnosis isn't the result; it's what brings results.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. It's a process. It's then again, it can be deeper information. In fact, in the afterword of the book, which I don't think was in the copy that I gave you, the afterword of the book, I commit the ultimate anti-Gnostic sin, and I say that once you've read this book, you have Gnosis of what I'm talking about, once you've understood it. I should say, once you've read it, you have episteme, but once you've understood it, you have gnosis of it. You know what I mean? That's the difference. I think that's something that's safe to say.
In the second half of your book, you deal with the Gnostic worldview in practice. Could you give us some examples? Like you have a chapter on marriage equality. How can the Gnostic worldview help us with this issue and other incendiary social issues?
Well, you know, the marriage equality one is a good one. I'm a huge proponent of marriage equality and same-sex marriage, and I think it's an important issue. And the reason why I think, or the way I think the Gnostic worldview can help us think about this, is by thinking about the import that we give to certain issues. The reason I wrote the essay in question is there was a lot of talk around here in Washington State, the most recent election, we ratified gay marriage, which was awesome. And there was a lot of talk around that time that it was a distraction, that we should be focusing more on the political scandals or the possible conspiracies that are going around in the background. I think that one Gnostic way of looking at that might be to take the opposite tack, which is that the political conspiracies, the stuff we read in the news about what's going on in the government and all that kind of stuff, that is the distraction, because that stuff is archonic. That's where the archons work. They work in the realms of politics, et cetera, et cetera. And if we get bogged down in that, then we lose sight of what's important, which is that everyone should be free to be able to say to someone else, I love you, and should be okay with that. It's good. It's good to be able to say to someone, even if it's somebody of the same sex, I love you more than anybody else, and I want you to be part of my family. That's inherently good, and to claim otherwise, I think, is archonic, because the archons are about restrictions, they're about limitations, they're about keeping you enclosed within fate. It's healthier, in my worldview, to try to fight back against them by easing restrictions, by going after social issues that will grant people more freedom to love one another. And I mean, I'm not talking about libertarianism or anything like that. That's the kind of false, because some people hear that and they think, oh, you're a libertarian. But that's what I'm talking about, is the distraction. Because as soon as you say, oh, you're a libertarian, you're back into the politics and you're back into the distracting archonic stuff. I'm not saying anything about libertarianism. I'm saying two people in love should be able to tell each other that in front of their family and have societies okay to do it.
You just came out with an article yesterday on the whole NSA government wiretapping. How does the Gnostic worldview work on that one?
Well, that's fate. I mean, that kind of thing to me is fate. Like, it's inevitable. I mean, any logical, reasonable person who is up on internet culture understands that that's the way we're going. These big government, one of my favorite sociologists / theologians, Jacques Ellul, he wrote a book on technology, and what he says is that technology will always expand to fill all of its potentialities. That's a paraphrase. And what he meant is, as soon as somebody split the atom, the bomb, coming up with the bomb was inevitable. You can't split the atom and then say, oh, we're going to make microwave ovens now, and then never have the bomb come along. That's not true. Somebody somewhere eventually is going to split the atom. And I think that in many ways, that's what we're seeing here with this NSA, PRISM, all that stuff. It's inevitable that these giant bureaucratic corporations, once they have the ability to collect this information, they're going to collect it. There's no way to get around that. It doesn't matter what we say or do. That's going to happen. And as that's the case, that is like an archonic structure. And so we need to learn to work outside of that structure if we're going to be able to maintain our sense of freedom within it. And so what I talk about is a silent resistance, where on the one hand, we're living in two worlds. So, you can't escape the archonic. And, there's some parts of this archonic structure that I like. I like to play video games. I like to watch cheesy TV shows sometimes. I have no illusion that that stuff is spiritually sound.
It's Heilig. You're being Heilig, Jeremy. God.
No, and I actually I'm a fan of Facebook and the interactions that I have there. I'm in touch with a lot of people who I wouldn't have been otherwise, and so I think there's a lot of benefit to it. But I have to become comfortable with the fact that they're going to collect all of this data and information on me, and there's nothing I can do about it. So what we have to do with this silent resistance is to live a life in which that fact no longer matters. We have to learn to give things away for free to our friends and family, to barter with one another for goods and services, to grow gardens, to do things that aren't really going to matter within that archonic system that they're generating via the surveillance state.
That makes sense. And of course, we do have to bring up Philip K. Dick in any of our conversation. Certainly ties in with the whole NSA police state. Right. Minority Report. The corporations are using our own data to give us what we want. So tell us about your section on the case for a Phil Dickian religious movement.
Well, it was a thought experiment more than anything else. And Phil Dick is of course. Quoted as saying that the idea of someone forming a religion around him would be not something he would be interested in.
Wouldn't join.
Right, exactly, yeah. And of course, we all know there are other religions based on science fiction authors that are of questionable provenance, acting in the world today. I won't name any names. Scientology. No. It was a thought experiment to say if indeed someone was to start a religion based on Philip K. Dick, what would that look like? And is there a case for it? And I think there is. And again, it's a thought experiment. I'm not going to start proselytizing under the name of Saint Dick or anything like that. But there are scriptures there. There's practice there. There's a foundational mythology. And there's a real message of compassion and kindness. And so all of the elements of an effective religious movement are there. I'm actually surprised that nobody has yet, to be perfectly honest. But I think my readers would especially those who are into Philip K. Dick, if they haven't had these thoughts, would certainly at least find it stimulating and give them something to think about.
Yeah, I agree. And it seems, regardless, more and more of Philip K. Dick's ideas seem to be more and more relevant. I mean... Definitely. He really was on top of things.
Definitely. Well, that's another issue is was he a prophet? And can you see him as a religious prophet? And, I argue that you certainly can.
And with the release of the book, have you heard of any of the latest breakthroughs or discoveries in Gnostic scholarship that you've heard, or any books that you might want to recommend, or even movies you might want to recommend to the listener?
Well, gosh, the whole old paradigm versus new paradigm that we've been talking about quite a while online and in various places I think that's still really the main item of interest within Gnostic studies. The idea coming out that Gnosticism as a category is a bad category, and that there was no Gnosticism, no singular Gnostic religion. Instead, it was, Gnostics or, a variety of different sects that had these ideas. And, David Bracke, is it Bracke? Is that how it's pronounced?
Yeah, Bracke.
Bracke, his book on the subject is definitely still, I think it's, one of the more important scholastic works that's come out, scholarly works that's come out on the subject. Karen King recently wrote a review of that book, and she characteristically disagrees with him.
Really?
Wow. She doesn't even think that the term Gnostic can apply to the Sethians.
Wow.
I don't know about that, but I think that this idea of this, the way it's described in Bracke's work is the battle view versus the horse race view. And the battle view is that there is a monolithic Christian orthodoxy versus a monolithic heretical current of some kind. And that's how it is in history. That's how it's always been. And that is, in many ways, that is the story being told by a lot of the neo-Gnostic occult revival groups, that there's a secret underground current that's always been there, and they're fighting against this monolithic orthodoxy. But that is the orthodox story. I mean, you know who came up with that idea, this idea of the battle? Irenaeus, everybody's favorite heresiologist. He's the guy who said, oh, there's this big Orthodox church, and it's fighting against this sort of, heretical trends. And so when you tell that story, you actually really are supporting sort of the Orthodox way of looking at things. Whereas the other idea, the idea of a horse race, where there were many different groups of Christians all racing one another, and then one eventually sort of came out the winner, it makes so much more sense when you start really getting into the history. And it really does get rid of this idea that there was this monolithic Gnosticism that the Christians all hated and wanted to get rid of. That's not how it was at all. I mean, you had Christians burning down Jewish synagogues, you had pagans burning down Christian churches. There's the one, there was the incident in Callinicum, I'm thinking of in particular, where they talk about how a mob of angry Christian monks burned down a Valentinian church, and this is very well documented in the letters of Julian and Ambrose, I believe. And the thing is that in that area at the time, there were about 50 different kinds of Christian. And it's just as possible that a group of Thomasine Christians burned down the Valentinian church, that Arians burned down the Valentinian church, you can't really continue to support this orthodox, dare I say, narrative of a monolithic church crushing some sort of singular monolithic heretical idea once you start looking at the scholarship. And to me, that's the most exciting thing. It's like, pretty much everything that we've thought about the idea of Gnosticism in the past, for the past, 150 years is totally being turned on its head. And that's exciting because it means we can be more honest about our own approaches to it.
Yeah, even remember the idea that Nicola Denze Lewis brought about, that the Nag Hammadi library might have been buried as some sort of funerary text. Both the Orthodox and modern Gnostics have such a resistance to that. It has to be brave monks hiding books in the middle of the night.
There's a lot of screaming against that. And in some ways, this is the anarchonic fallacy, as I call it, which is that Gnosticism or Gnosis is fighting back against something. You have to be against something. You have to resist something. You need this myth of this monstrous Orthodox who crushed the Gnostics, even though the historical evidence is starting to prove that that is not what happened. And that's dangerous because I think we go back. It always brings me back to PKD again. By fighting the empire, you become it. And I think that a lot of these groups that are using this as their formative myth are in danger of becoming exactly what they oppose, because you see it all the time on these internet Gnostic websites and stuff, that the Orthodox are horrible, and gosh, we sure hate all these guys, and they killed all of our forebears, and we can never let it happen again. Let's sort of like the pagan burning times. Oh no, we can never have the burning times again. They can never kill us all. And it's more nuanced than that. It's too nuanced for the internet. You really need to sort of step back and be willing to look at what people are saying about what actually happened. That's my opinion anyhow.
Well, I think that's all the time we have today, Jeremy. I'd like to thank you very much for once again coming on Aeon Byte and discussing your great new book, How to Think Like a Gnostic.
Yes, which should be, the paperback should be available by the time this interview airs. Available through the usual evil archonic empire of Amazon.com. How to Think Like a Gnostic. And also, you can always find out what I'm up to on strangeanimal.net, or the Gnostic section of that website, which is strangeanimal.net/thisway, all one word.
Well, great. Well, we hope to have you on back, or at least your doppelganger.
Thanks. So you're talking to my doppelganger right now.
And there you have it, my beloved True Seekers. Jeremy Puma on another cosmic orgasm of an interview. If you're not thinking like a Gnostic right about now, then maybe you should make sure you aren't pouring cocaine in your coffee instead of healthy aspartame. In this world of conspiracy theories and corporate espionage and data mining by the government and social media insanity, the Gnostic message is more relevant than ever. And you can find how to address all of these issues in Jeremy's new book, How to Think Like a Gnostic. Jeremy is also the author of This Way, Making Sense of Gnosis in a Nonsensical Reality, Mysteries of the Gnostic Ascent, and The Face of the Sky and Earth. For more information on Jeremy, please visit his new site, strangeanimal.net. Please support Aeon Byte Gnostic Radio with donations or any help you can proffer. Clicking on our ads or using our Amazon links, even if you don't buy any of my consciousness-expanding books, really helps. Supporting the alternative media is one of the best ways to moon the god of this world, as well as the idiot pointing at the idiot pointing at the moon. Let us stop being frogs in boiling water for the eventual satanic meal of the elite. Like the Gospel of Philip says, but the archons wanted to deceive man. They took the name of those that are good and gave it to those that are not good, so that through the names they might deceive him and bind them. Hobbit podcasts like Aeon Byte Gnostic Radio are the way the rings of fraudulent desire can be thrown in the Mount Dooms of our collective amnesia. I'm also looking for extra work as a writer or anything. I'll even walk your dire wolves or give your sex slave smurfs in the basement a sponge bath for a few extra shekels. I am truly grateful for you homoplasmates who support this blasphemy on a weekly basis. And I'm certainly grateful for those of you who simply join the virtual Alexandria each week. We continue storming the gates of hell and raging against heaven for our misplaced childhoods and paradises lost. Or as Moby sang about Chicago in his song Southside, here we are now going to the South Side. I pick up my friends and we hope we won't die. Right at night, right through heaven and hell, and come back and feel so well. Watching out for a sunny day where there's love and darkness and my sidearm. I am Abraxas, broadcasting at the virtual Alexandria through the God above God Dad can. The road is ended, the song is over. Thought I'd have something more to say. But don't cultivate any troubles, my beloved True Seekers, because like heaven above you, the spy that loved you, I'm keeping all of your secrets safe with me tonight. Hello and goodbye as always.
Have you ever seen a commie drink a glass of water?
Well, no, I can't say I have, Jack.
Vodka. That's what they drink, isn't it? Never water.
Well, I believe that's what they drink, Jack, yes.
On no account will a commie ever drink water, and not without good reason.
Oh, yes. I can't quite see what you're getting at, Jack.
Water. That's what I'm getting at, water. Mandrake, water is the source of all life. 7/10 of this Earth's surface is water. Why do you realize that 70% of you is water?
Oh, God.
And as human beings, you and I need fresh, pure water to replenish our precious bodily fluids.
Yes.
Are you beginning to understand?
Yes.
Mandrake. Mandrake, have you never wondered why I drink only distilled water or rainwater and only pure grain alcohol?
Well, it did occur to me, Jack, yes.
Have you ever heard of a thing called fluoridation? Fluoridation of water?
Yes, I have heard of that, Jack, yes. Yes.
Well, do you know what it is?
No. I don't know what it is now.
Do you realize that fluoridation is the most monstrously conceived and dangerous communist plot we have ever had to face? Token play a dead game, soldier. That's nice shooting, soldier.